I'm Jennifer, 35, staring at my totaled BMW with tears streaming down my face. My parents borrowed it to take Stephanie and her kids to an amusement park, but returned it with a crumpled front end and broken headlight. Dad hands me a check that won't cover half the repairs, saying, "It's not like you need it for work anyway, you work from home." They claim it was a hit and run, but something feels off about their story. What I discover on the forgotten dashcam footage will change my family forever. Before I dive into this nightmare, I'd love to know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family betrayal, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want more stories about standing up for yourself against toxic family members. Now, let me take you back to how this all started. Growing up, I always knew where I stood in my family's hierarchy. At the very top was my sister Stephanie, now 39, the golden child who could do no wrong. Below her were my parents, whose entire existence seemed to revolve around her. And then, somewhere near the bottom, there was me. Stephanie had it all: the perfect husband Robert, a successful investment banker, two beautiful children, Mason, 10, and Lily, 8, and a sprawling house in the suburbs. Meanwhile, I had built my own life as a freelance graphic designer working from home. I wasn't married, had no children, and lived in a modest but comfortable condo that I bought with my own money. "When are you going to settle down, Jennifer?" My mom would ask at every family gathering. "Your biological clock is ticking, you know. Don't you want what your sister has?" What I wanted was acknowledgement that my path was valid too. I had built a successful business from scratch, something my family never seemed to appreciate. My clients included several major companies, and after years of saving, I finally rewarded myself with something I'd dreamed of since college: a brand new BMW 3 Series in sleek black. It wasn't the most expensive car in the world, but it represented something important to me: independence and the fruits of my hard work. The car had been mine for just 3 months when my parents called on a Wednesday night. "Jennifer, we need a favor," my dad said, his voice carrying that tone he used when he wasn't actually asking but telling. "We're planning a special weekend with Stephanie and the kids, but we have a problem with transportation." "What kind of problem?" I asked, already sensing where this was going. "Well, Stephanie's Range Rover is in the shop and our car is too small to comfortably fit everyone. We were hoping we could borrow your BMW for the weekend." I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, the one that appeared whenever I was about to disappoint my family by not prioritizing Stephanie. "Dad, I don't know. I just got that car and I'm still really protective of it." "It's just for the weekend, Jennifer," my mother chimed in from the extension. "Don't be selfish. We want to take the kids to that new amusement park, and it would be so much more comfortable in your car." "But what about my plans?" I said, even though I didn't actually have any specific ones. It was the principle of the thing. "What plans?" my dad scoffed. "You work from home. It's not like you need your car every day like people with real jobs." The comment stung, but I was used to it. My work had never been considered a real job by my family, despite the fact that I made more money than my dad did before he retired. "Robert would lend us his Mercedes," my mother added, "but he needs it for a business meeting on Saturday." After 20 minutes of guilt-tripping, I reluctantly agreed. "Fine, but please be careful with it. It's brand new and really important to me." When they came to pick up the car on Friday morning, I gave them detailed instructions. "Premium gas only, please. Park away from other cars to avoid door dings. And please, no eating inside." My dad rolled his eyes. "It's a car, Jennifer, not a newborn baby. We know how to take care of things." As they were leaving, I remembered something. "Oh, and just so you know, there's a dash cam installed. It records automatically when the car is running. I had it put in after someone backed into me in a parking lot last month." My mom nodded absently, clearly not paying attention as she admired the leather interior. "Have fun," I said, watching them drive away in my prized possession. That evening, I received a text from my mom. "Having a wonderful time. The kids love riding in your fancy car. Thanks again." I smiled, trying to push away my anxiety. Maybe I was being overprotective. Maybe this act of generosity would finally earn me some recognition in my family. I had no idea that in just 2 days, my relationship with every member of my family would be irreparably changed. Sunday evening arrived, and I was looking forward to getting my car back. I had spent the weekend catching up on client projects and streaming movies I'd been meaning to watch. Around 7 p.m., I heard a car pull up outside my condo. Looking through the window, I immediately knew something was wrong. Even in the dim glow of the streetlights, I could see the damage to my BMW. The front end was crumpled on the driver's side, the headlight was broken, and ugly scratches marred the once perfect paint. My stomach dropped as I rushed outside. "What happened?" I gasped, running my hand over the damaged fender. My dad's expression was a mix of irritation and defensiveness. "Someone hit the car in a parking lot while we were having lunch. Hit and run, not our fault." "We filed a police report," my mom added quickly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Your father did everything right." I circled the car, taking in the extent of the damage. "This doesn't look like a parking lot fender bender. This looks serious." "Well, that's what happened," my dad said firmly. "We were inside the restaurant, and when we came out, the car was like this. Someone must have hit it pretty hard and then took off." "Where's the police report?" I asked. Dad reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "Here. We filed it right away at the local station." I glanced at the document, noting the unfamiliar precinct name and a case number. "Look, Jennifer," my dad continued, "these things happen. It's why people have insurance." He pulled out his checkbook and wrote something before handing it to me. "Here's $2,000 toward your deductible. That's all we can afford right now." I stared at the check. "Dad, my deductible is $1,000, but the damage looks way worse than that. This could be thousands in repairs." My mother sighed dramatically. "It's just a car, Jennifer. We're all safe, and that's what matters. I don't understand why you're so materialistic." Before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Stephanie. "Jenny? Mom told me what happened." "I'm so sorry about your car. Are the kids okay?" Her concern for her children before my car irritated me, but I kept my voice level. "Everyone's fine, apparently. Just my car that's totaled." "Don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice taking on that condescending tone I knew too well. "It's just a fender bender. Besides, you should be grateful everyone is safe. That's more important than any material possession, right?" Something in her tone seemed off, almost rehearsed. It was the same feeling I got when she lied to our parents about breaking a vase when we were kids, then blamed it on me. "Right," I said quietly. "Everyone's safety is what matters." After a few more minutes of my parents minimizing the damage and my feelings about it, they left me standing alone in my parking lot with my damaged car and a check that wouldn't cover a fraction of the repairs. As their car disappeared around the corner, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than they were telling me. Something wasn't adding up, but I was too upset at that moment to figure out what. I went inside and poured myself a generous glass of wine, trying to calm down enough to think clearly. Tomorrow, I would call my insurance and figure out how bad the damage really was. For now, all I could do was try to process the fact that my beautiful car, my symbol of independence and success, was sitting damaged outside, and my family seemed to think I was overreacting for being upset about it. Monday morning came with a pounding headache and a sense of dread. I called my insurance company first thing, and they arranged for an adjuster to come look at the car that afternoon. While waiting, I decided to inspect the damage more thoroughly in daylight. The front driver's side was badly crumpled, with the headlight completely shattered. The bumper was hanging off slightly, and the hood had a noticeable dent. As I circled the car, I noticed other things my parents hadn't mentioned: a long scratch along the passenger side and a crack in the back taillight. The insurance adjuster arrived promptly at 2 p.m., clipboard in hand. "This is quite extensive damage," he remarked after examining the car. "I'm estimating repairs at around $15,000, possibly more if there's structural damage we can't see yet." $15,000? I repeated, my voice rising. But my parents said it was just a hit and run in a parking lot. The adjuster looked skeptical. "This doesn't look like a parking lot collision to me. The angle and extent of impact suggests the car hit something stationary, like a wall or guardrail, while moving at a decent speed." After he left, I sat in my damaged car, trying to make sense of things. Why would my parents lie about what happened? And if they weren't driving, who was? Then I remembered something I had completely forgotten about in the shock of seeing my damaged car: the dash cam. I had mentioned it to my parents when they borrowed the car, but I doubted they'd remembered or even known how to disconnect it. With shaking hands, I reached up and removed the small camera from its mount on the windshield. I took it inside, connected it to my laptop, and downloaded the footage from the weekend. Fast-forwarding through hours of driving footage, I finally found what I was looking for. Saturday afternoon, around 2 p.m. according to the timestamp. To my surprise, it wasn't my father driving as they had claimed, it was Stephanie. She was alone in the front seat, no sign of my parents, with Mason and Lily buckled in the back. The kids were being loud, arguing about something, and Stephanie looked annoyed. Then her phone rang. "Hey," she answered, holding the phone to her ear while driving my car. "Yeah, I dropped them at the mall. No, they think I'm taking the kids to lunch while they shop. About 2 hours, I think." My stomach knotted as I watched her drive with one hand, repeatedly glancing down at her phone. The kids got louder in the back and she turned to yell at them. "Both of you, be quiet. I'm trying to—" And that's when it happened. When she turned back to the road, her eyes widened in panic. The car swerved, and there was a sickening crunch as the front end collided with what looked like a guardrail. The airbag deployed, the kids screamed, and the camera was knocked askew but still recording. After a moment of stunned silence, Stephanie checked on the kids, then immediately made another call. "Robert? I need help. I just had an accident in Jennifer's car." "No, the kids are fine, just scared." "No, Jennifer doesn't know. I wasn't supposed to be driving it at all. My parents were supposed to be with me, but Yes, I know what we agreed. Can you come get us? And bring cash for a cab to take the car somewhere." The next hour of footage showed Stephanie and the kids being picked up by Robert. Then, later, the car was being driven by someone else, a man I didn't recognize, possibly a cab driver. The final footage showed my father getting into the driver's seat in what looked like a shopping mall parking lot. "Is this good?" he asked someone off camera. "Perfect," my mother's voice replied. "Now we just need to say someone hit it while we were having lunch." "Jennifer's going to be upset," my father said, sounding genuinely concerned. "She'll get over it," my mother answered dismissively. "It's just a car. Besides, we can't let Stephanie get in trouble with Robert. You know how he feels about her driving record." The footage ended there and I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I'd just seen. My sister had been driving my car without permission, crashed it while distracted, and then my parents had helped her cover it up, all while planning to make me pay for most of the repairs. The betrayal cut deep. Not just the lie, but the casual way they had dismissed my feelings, my property, and me. I had always known I was second best to Stephanie, but this was beyond anything I had imagined my family capable of. I watched the footage again, anger building with each viewing. By the time I'd seen it a third time, I knew I couldn't let this go. For once in my life, I wasn't going to accept being treated this way by my own family. But I needed to be smart about this. If I confronted them now, they might deny everything, claim the footage was doctored, or find some way to twist things around to make me the villain for exposing them. No, I needed to gather more information first. I needed to build an airtight case before I confronted them with the truth. With renewed determination, I backed up the dashcam footage to multiple places and began to plan my next steps. This time, they wouldn't get away with treating me like an afterthought. If you've ever felt that moment when everything you thought you knew about your family suddenly shifts, hit that like button. I was about to embark on an investigation that would reveal even more than I bargained for. Stay tuned for what happens next. The next morning, I woke up with a clear mission: confirm exactly what happened and uncover the full extent of my family's deception. I started by calling the police department listed on the report my father had given me. "Hello, I'm calling about a hit-and-run report filed on Saturday. The case number is 2023-4872, I said to the officer who answered. After a brief hold, the officer returned. "Ma'am, we don't have any record of that case number in our system. Could it be filed under a different number?" "It would have been reported by Thomas Williams on Saturday afternoon. I've checked all reports from Saturday, and there's nothing under that name or involving a black BMW. My suspicions confirmed. I thanked the officer and hung up. The police report was fake. I wasn't even surprised anymore, just disappointed and increasingly angry. My next step was to check Stephanie's social media. She was an avid poster, documenting nearly every moment of her perfect life online. Sure enough, her Instagram showed several posts from the weekend, but none matched the story my parents had told. There were no pictures of an amusement park visit with my parents. Instead, there were shots of Mason and Lily at what looked like a lakeside restaurant on Saturday afternoon around the time the accident happened, based on the dashcam timestamp. The location tag showed Harbor View Restaurant, about 30 miles from the amusement park they were supposedly visiting. I zoomed in on one photo and noticed Robert wasn't in any of the pictures either, despite my parents claiming the whole purpose of borrowing my car was for a family outing that included everyone. With growing suspicion, I decided to call Robert directly. I rarely spoke to my brother-in-law one-on-one, but we were cordial enough. I rehearsed my approach carefully before dialing. "Robert, it's Jennifer. I'm sorry to bother you at work, but I need some information for my insurance claim about the car accident." "Oh, right," he said, sounding distracted. "What do you need?" "Just confirming the timeline." "What time did you meet them at the amusement park on Saturday?" There was a pause. "Amusement park? I wasn't at any amusement park on Saturday. I had meetings all day." "But my parents said." "Look, Jennifer," he cut in, his voice lowered. "I don't know what Stephanie told you, but I was working. That's why she took the kids out with your parents. She wasn't even supposed to drive your car. That was the agreement, since her license is still." He stopped abruptly. "Her license is what, Robert?" He sighed. "I've already said too much. You should talk to Stephanie about this." After hanging up, I sat back, processing this new information. What was going on with Stephanie's license? And if Robert was working and my sister wasn't supposed to drive my car, where were my parents when the accident happened? I needed more information. On a hunch, I called my parents' next-door neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who spent most of her days watching the neighborhood from her front window. "Mrs. Patterson? It's Jennifer Williams. I'm trying to get in touch with my parents, but they're not answering. Did you happen to see them leave the house this weekend?" "Oh, Jennifer, dear. How nice to hear from you. Your parents? They were home all weekend. I saw your father working in the garden on Saturday, and your mother brought me some of her lemon bars Sunday morning." My parents hadn't gone anywhere. The entire story about the family trip was fabricated. The final piece fell into place when I remembered I was still on a family credit card plan from years ago. I had my own account now but had never bothered to remove my login access to the family account dashboard. I logged in and checked the recent transactions. There it was. Stephanie had used her card at Harborview Restaurant at 1:24 p.m. on Saturday, shortly before the accident. There were also charges at a boutique called Lavender and Lace earlier that day, a store I knew was nowhere near the amusement park. But the most revealing charge was from a hotel called the Lakeside Inn from Friday night, a single room. Why would Stephanie need a hotel room for a family outing? The picture was becoming clearer, but I needed one more confirmation. I looked up Stephanie's Range Rover service center and called them. "Hi, I'm calling about my sister's vehicle. Stephanie Williams? She mentioned it was in your shop last weekend, and I was wondering if it's ready yet." "Williams, Range Rover. I don't see any record of that vehicle being serviced here recently. The last visit was for routine maintenance about 2 months ago. Her car hadn't been in the shop at all." Another lie. As I pieced everything together, the truth emerged. Stephanie had been having an affair. She had used the fake story about a family outing to get my car for the weekend, told my parents she was taking the kids to meet Robert while actually meeting someone else, and then crashed my car while distracted. My parents had covered for her, creating an elaborate lie about a hit and run and a police report, all to protect their golden child while leaving me with a destroyed car and a financial burden. The betrayal was complete, not just from Stephanie, whom I had always known was selfish, but from my parents, who were supposed to love us equally. They had sacrificed my car, my financial security, and my trust, all to protect Stephanie from consequences that were entirely of her own making. I sat among the scattered evidence of their deception, the fake police report, the credit card statements, the social media posts, and felt a strange calm replace my anger. For years I had sought their approval, their love, their acknowledgement that I mattered as much as Stephanie did. Now I knew I would never get it, and somehow that knowledge was freeing. I gathered everything into a folder, made copies, and prepared to confront them. But I wasn't going to do it in anger or haste. I was going to be strategic, deliberate, and most importantly, I was going to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. If you've ever had that moment of clarity when you realize you deserve better from the people who should love you unconditionally, you understand what I was feeling. Has anyone else discovered their family's betrayal through unexpected evidence? Share your experience in the comments below. Now, let me tell you how I planned my confrontation. The weight of what I had discovered settled heavily on me as I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by evidence of my family's betrayal. This wasn't just about a car accident or even about the lies. It was about a lifetime of being treated as less than, of having my needs and feelings dismissed in favor of Stephanie's. I needed help processing all of this, so I called my best friend Kayla, the one person who had always seen through my family's dynamic. "They did what?" she exclaimed after I explained everything. "Jen, that's beyond messed up. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront them," I said with more confidence than I felt. "But I want to be smart about it. If I just call them out emotionally, they'll find a way to turn it around on me." "You're right," Kayla agreed. "They'll say you're overreacting or being dramatic. You need to approach this like a business negotiation." That made sense to my strategic mind. So I need to be prepared with evidence, counter-arguments, and a clear goal. "Exactly, and you need backup. Have you considered talking to a lawyer?" I hadn't, but the suggestion made sense. The next morning, I contacted Madison Rivera, a family attorney Kayla had used during her divorce. Madison listened to my story with professional interest, occasionally jotting notes. From a legal standpoint, she said when I finished, "You have several options. Your sister operated your vehicle without your permission, caused significant damage, and then conspired with your parents to commit insurance fraud by filing a false police report. I don't necessarily want to sue my family," I clarified. "I just want them to take responsibility and make this right." "Understanding your legal leverage can help even if you don't intend to use it," Madison explained. "Sometimes just knowing you could take legal action is enough to motivate people to do the right thing." She helped me draft a formal letter outlining the damages and financial impact: $15,000 in repairs, a $500 increase in my annual insurance premium due to the accident, rental car costs of $50 per day for at least 2 weeks while my car was being fixed. "Send this only if your direct confrontation doesn't work," Madison advised. "Give them a chance to do the right thing first." Over the next 2 days, I prepared methodically. I created a folder containing copies of the dashcam footage, screenshots of Stephanie's social media posts with timestamps, printouts of the credit card statements, a statement from the police department confirming no report had been filed, confirmation from the Range Rover Service Center that Stephanie's car was not being repaired, a detailed breakdown of all costs associated with the accident, the letter Madison had helped me draft. I also prepared emotionally, anticipating how each family member might react. Stephanie would likely become defensive and try to paint herself as the victim. My father might try to minimize the situation or deflect. My mother would probably attempt to guilt-trip me about family loyalty. For each potential reaction, I prepared a calm, factual response. I rehearsed these with Kayla, who played devil's advocate ruthlessly, throwing the worst possible family responses at me until I could handle them without getting emotional. "What about the kids?" Kayla asked during one of our practice sessions. "They'll probably be at the family dinner too." I hadn't considered that. Mason and Lily were innocent in all this, and I didn't want to expose them to this ugly adult situation. "Maybe I should confront my parents and Stephanie separately," I mused. "No way," Kayla countered. "They'll just coordinate their stories again. You need to catch them all together, but maybe suggest the kids eat in another room or watch a movie." The upcoming Sunday dinner at my parents' house would be the perfect opportunity. Every week, the entire family gathered for my mother's roast chicken, a tradition that had survived despite the underlying tensions. I had skipped the previous week's dinner due to the car situation, but this Sunday, I would be there with a purpose. I called my mother to confirm I would be attending. "Oh, Jennifer, that's wonderful," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. "We missed you last week. And don't worry about your car situation, we won't bring it up." Of course they wouldn't want to bring it up. They thought the matter was settled. I would handle the repairs, absorb the financial hit, and everything would continue as normal, with Stephanie protected from consequences and me accepting whatever scraps of consideration my family deigned to give me. But this time would be different. This time, I wouldn't just swallow the injustice and smile through dinner. This time, I would stand up for myself, even if it meant permanently altering my family relationships. The night before the confrontation, I couldn't sleep. Part of me wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe family peace was worth more than justice or respect. Maybe I should just accept the loss and move on. But then I remembered the casual way my mother had dismissed my feelings. "It's just a car, Jennifer." I remembered my father's check that wouldn't cover even a fraction of the damage, handed over as if he were doing me a favor. I remembered Stephanie's fake sympathy on the phone. No, I deserved better than this. And if my family couldn't see that, then maybe the relationships weren't worth preserving in their current form anyway. Sunday morning, I dressed carefully in a simple blue dress that made me feel confident. I backed up the dashcam footage to 3 different places, including sending it to Kayla and Madison. I packed my evidence folder into my bag, got into my rental car, and drove to my parents' house, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. Today was the day everything would change. Today, I would finally stand up for myself. I arrived at my parents' suburban home precisely at 3 p.m., the designated time for our Sunday family dinner. The familiar brick house with its manicured lawn looked exactly as it always had, though something felt different, perhaps because I was different now. Robert's Mercedes was already parked in the driveway, alongside my parents' sedan. I pulled my rental car behind them, took a deep breath, and grabbed my bag containing the evidence folder. Inside, the scene was painfully normal. My mother bustled around the kitchen, putting final touches on the meal. My father sat in his recliner watching golf. Stephanie was arranging flowers in a vase, while Robert checked his phone in the corner. Mason and Lily were playing a board game on the living room floor. "Jennifer," my mother exclaimed when I walked in. "So glad you could make it. We missed you last week." "Hey sis," Stephanie said with a smile that now seemed hollow. "How's the car situation?" "We're not bringing that up today," my mother interjected quickly. "Let's just have a nice family dinner without any unpleasantness." I nodded, deciding to bide my time. "Can I help with anything, Mom?" "You can set the table," she replied, seeming pleased by my cooperative tone. As I arranged plates and silverware, I listened to the typical family chatter. Stephanie dominated the conversation as usual, talking about Mason's soccer tournament and Lily's dance recital. "Mason scored 3 goals, she boasted. "The coach says he's the best player on the team." "That's wonderful," my mother gushed. "He gets his athleticism from your side of the family, Robert." My father chimed in. "Lily's dance photos turned out beautifully. We've already ordered prints for the hallway." I noticed no one had asked about my week or my work. It was as if I existed only as an audience for Stephanie's perfect life, a life I now knew was built partly on lies. When we sat down to eat, the conversation turned to my perpetually disappointing life choices. "Any prospects on the horizon, Jennifer?" my mother asked as she served the roast chicken. "You're not getting any younger, you know." "Mom," Stephanie said with fake sisterly defense, "not everyone wants the traditional path. Maybe Jennifer is happy being single and childless." The way she said childless made it sound like a terminal diagnosis. "I'm just saying," my mother continued. "It would be nice if your father and I had grandchildren from both our daughters before we die. Your career is important too, of course," my father added, as if granting a concession, "though I still don't understand why you couldn't get a normal job with benefits like everyone else." I stayed unusually quiet through these familiar jabs, which seemed to both confuse and please my family. Normally, I would defend myself or change the subject. Today, I simply ate my food and observed the family dynamics with new eyes. "Jennifer, you're so quiet today," my mother finally remarked. "Is everything all right?" This was my opening. I put down my fork and looked around the table. "Actually, there is something I'd like to share with everyone." "If it's about the car again," my father began. "It is about the car," I interrupted calmly. "But probably not in the way you're expecting. I have something I'd like to show everyone." I stood up and walked to my bag, retrieving my laptop. "Mason, Lily, would you two mind taking your plates to the kitchen and watching TV for a bit? The adults need to discuss something." Stephanie frowned. "Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of the children." "I don't think you want that," I replied, meeting her eyes directly. "Trust me on this." Something in my tone must have alarmed her because she hesitated, then nodded at her children. Go ahead, kids. Take your dessert and watch that show you like. Once the children were out of earshot, I connected my laptop to my parents' TV. I told you when I lent you my car that it had a dash cam installed, I said, my voice steady. I don't think any of you realized what that meant. My father's face paled slightly. What are you talking about? I'm talking about what really happened to my car last Saturday, I replied, hitting play on the video. For the next 10 minutes, the room was silent except for the audio from the dashcam footage. We all watched as Stephanie drove my car with her children, took the phone call, crashed into the guardrail, and then called Robert to help her cover it up. We saw the cab driver moving the car, and finally, my parents staging the fake hit-and-run scene in the parking lot. When the video ended, I turned to face my family. My mother's hand was covering her mouth in shock. My father stared at the floor. Robert looked at Stephanie with barely contained fury. And Stephanie looked like someone who had just watched her carefully constructed world begin to crumble. You had no right, she finally sputtered. That's an invasion of privacy. It was my car, I replied calmly. And you had no right to drive it without my permission, crash it while on the phone, and then lie about it. It was an accident, she protested. I was going to tell you eventually. When? After I paid thousands to fix it? After my insurance rates went up? After you all made me feel guilty for being upset about my totaled car? Jennifer, my mother interjected, recovering her composure. I understand you're upset, but this is family business. We were just trying to protect Stephanie. From what, Mom? From the consequences of her own actions? And at my expense, as usual? You don't understand, my father said. Stephanie's situation is complicated. Then explain it to me, I challenged. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like Stephanie crashed my car while having an affair, and you helped her cover it up. Robert's head snapped towards Stephanie. Affair? What is she talking about? I hadn't meant to reveal that part, but now that it was out, I couldn't take it back. The hotel charge, Stephanie. The Lakeside Inn, Friday night. 1 room. Where were the kids then? With us, my mother admitted quietly. She said she and Robert needed a night alone. Robert stood up, his face a mask of controlled rage. So not only did you lie about the car, but you've been lying about where you've been going? Who were you with, Stephanie? Stephanie burst into tears, the perfect victim as always. This is all your fault, she sobbed, pointing at me. You had to ruin everything with your stupid dashcam and your detective work. Why couldn't you just let it go? Because it's not fair, I said, my voice finally breaking with emotion. It's never been fair. You get everything, the praise, the support, the excuses, and I get nothing but criticism and leftovers. And now you expected me to pay thousands of dollars because you couldn't be bothered to drive carefully or tell the truth. The room descended into chaos. Robert demanded to know the name of Stephanie's affair partner. My parents tried to mediate while simultaneously defending Stephanie. And I stood in the middle of it all, watching as decades of family dynamics unraveled before my eyes. Finally, Robert grabbed his keys. Kids, we're leaving, he called. Mason and Lily appeared, confused by the tension in the room. Say goodbye to your grandparents. We need to go home. But Daddy, we haven't finished dessert, Lily protested. We'll get ice cream on the way home, he promised, his voice gentle with them despite his anger. As they gathered their things, my father turned to me. Are you happy now? You've torn the family apart with this vendetta. I looked him straight in the eye. I didn't tear anything apart, Dad. Your lies did that. Your choices. Your constant favoritism. I just exposed what was already broken. Jennifer, my mother pleaded, please, we're family. We can work this out. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder of evidence, placing it on the dining table. Inside is a breakdown of all the costs associated with the accident. Repairs, insurance increase, rental car. If you want to work this out, you can start by covering the full amount. I've also included a letter from my attorney outlining potential legal consequences of filing a false police report and insurance fraud. You would sue your own family? My mother gasped. I don't want to, I said honestly. But I will if I have to. I deserve to be treated with respect, and if this is the only way to get it, so be it. I picked up my bag and headed for the door. As I reached it, Stephanie called out, You'll regret this, Jennifer. Family is all we have in this world. I turned back one last time. No, Stephanie. Family should be about love, support, and respect. What we have is none of those things. And until that changes, I'm better off on my own. With that, I walked out, leaving behind the wreckage of my family's false harmony. My hands were shaking as I got into my rental car, but my resolve remained firm. For the first time in my life, I had stood up for myself against my family, and despite the pain, it felt like the beginning of something new, something healthier and more authentic. The days following the family dinner confrontation passed in a blur of emotions. I fluctuated between feeling empowered by finally standing up for myself and being racked with guilt for exposing Stephanie's affair and potentially destroying her marriage. Despite everything she had done, she was still my sister, and the complicated love I felt for her remained tangled with my anger and hurt. Monday morning, I woke to 17 missed calls, 8 from my mother, 5 from my father, 3 from Stephanie, and 1 from Robert. There were also numerous text messages, ranging from my mother's pleas to talk this through as a family, to Stephanie's accusations that I was a vindictive bitch who had always been jealous of her happiness. I ignored them all, needing time to process everything that had happened. Around noon, my doorbell rang. I peeked through the peephole to see Stephanie standing there, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. For a moment, I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "What do you want, Stephanie?" She looked terrible, hair unbrushed, wearing sweats instead of her usual perfectly coordinated outfit. "Can I come in, please?" Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. She entered and immediately collapsed onto my couch, fresh tears flowing. "Robert's left me," she sobbed. "He took the kids to his parents' house last night, and this morning he called to say he's filing for divorce." I sat across from her, maintaining emotional distance. "I'm sorry about that, but I didn't tell him to leave you. Your choices did that." "My choices?" She looked up, anger flashing through her tears. "You had no right to expose my private life like that. And you had no right to crash my car and lie about it," I countered. "What were you thinking, Stephanie? Why all the deception?" Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, the perfectly constructed facade of my golden child sister completely crumbled. "You wouldn't understand. Your life is so simple. You only have yourself to worry about. Try me." She sighed deeply. "Robert and I have been having problems for years. He's always working, barely notices me anymore. I met someone at my yoga class, Mark. He made me feel alive again, appreciated. It started as friendship, but... So you used me and my car to facilitate your affair? It wasn't like that. I just needed space, freedom. My Range Rover has a tracker on it. Robert had it installed after he suspected something last year. I couldn't use it to meet Mark without Robert knowing. And the accident?" She looked away. "Mark ended things that day. Said he couldn't keep lying to his wife. I was upset, distracted. The kids were fighting in the back seat. I lost control for just a second. And rather than tell the truth, you created this elaborate lie and got our parents to help you cover it up?" I panicked. Robert already suspected something, and with his family's connections, he could take the kids from me if he had proof of an affair and my license. I already had 2 moving violations. Another one would have meant suspension. The pieces were finally falling into place. "So Mom and Dad helped you because they were worried about you losing the kids?" She nodded miserably. "They suggested the hit-and-run story. Dad even created that fake police report. We thought your insurance would just cover it, and no one would get hurt. Except me," I pointed out. "I would get hurt financially, and my insurance rates would go up. Did any of you consider that?" Stephanie had the grace to look ashamed. "I'm sorry, Jennifer. I really am. Everything just spiraled out of control. Why didn't you just ask to borrow my car honestly? I might have said yes. Would you have? After how I've treated you all these years?" The question hung in the air between us, painfully honest. "I don't know," I finally admitted. "Maybe not, but lying and manipulating was still wrong." We sat in silence for a few moments before she spoke again. "What am I going to do now? Robert won't even talk to me except through his lawyer. Mom and Dad are devastated. It's all falling apart." For a split second, I felt the familiar pull to fix things for Stephanie, to soothe her pain and make everything better. It had been my role for so long, but this time I resisted. "I can't fix this for you, Stephanie. You need to take responsibility for your actions and deal with the consequences." "That's it? That's all you have to say to your sister?" "What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? I'm not there yet. That I'll help you convince Robert to take you back? I won't do that. He deserves the truth, just like I did. She stood up, anger replacing her vulnerability. This is why you've always been alone, Jennifer. You're cold, unforgiving. At least I know how to love people. Love isn't lying or manipulating or taking advantage, I said quietly. And I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who don't respect me. After Stephanie left, I sat in the silence of my apartment, replaying our conversation. For the first time, I had seen beneath my sister's perfect exterior to the insecurity and desperation beneath. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand it better. Later that afternoon, I received a call from my mother. "Jennifer, please talk to me," she pleaded. "Your father has taken out a loan against the house to pay for your car repairs. We'll have the money by the end of the week." The news surprised me. He's taken out a loan? Yes, we know we handled this all wrong. We should have been honest from the start, but we were trying to protect Stephanie and the grandchildren. Surely you can understand that? I understand wanting to protect her, Mom. What I don't understand is why it always has to be at my expense. Why am I always the one expected to sacrifice? My mother was quiet for a moment. I don't know what to say to that, Jennifer. I've never thought of it that way. It wasn't much, but it was the first time my mother had acknowledged, even indirectly, the imbalance in how they treated us. I need time, Mom. I'm glad Dad is paying for the repairs, but money doesn't fix the betrayal. I need space to figure out what kind of relationship I want with all of you moving forward. The following days brought more revelations. Several extended family members reached out after hearing what happened. Apparently, my mother had been calling relatives for sympathy, inadvertently spreading the story. To my surprise, many of them took my side. "Your parents have always favored Stephanie," my Aunt Lisa confided during a long phone call. "We've all seen it for years but didn't know how to bring it up. What they did with your car crossed a line." My cousin Mark shared similar observations. "When we were kids, I noticed how your achievements were always downplayed while Stephanie's were celebrated. It wasn't fair then, and it's not fair now." These conversations were both validating and painful. On one hand, it was a relief to know I hadn't imagined the disparate treatment. On the other, learning that others had seen it for years but said nothing made me feel even more isolated. Meanwhile, Stephanie's life continued to unravel. Through family grapevine, I learned that Robert was proceeding with the divorce and seeking primary custody of the children. While I had no desire to see my niece and nephew caught in the middle of an ugly custody battle, I also knew it wasn't my responsibility to fix a situation of Stephanie's making. When my car was finally repaired and returned to me 2 weeks later, paid for in full by my parents, it didn't bring the satisfaction I had expected. The car was fixed, but the damage to my family relationships remained. Yet amidst the emotional turmoil, I found unexpected strength. For the first time, I had stood firm in my worth, refusing to accept less than I deserved from the people who should have valued me most. That alone was worth more than any car. 6 weeks after the confrontation, life had settled into a new and unfamiliar pattern. My repaired BMW sat in my assigned parking space, looking almost as good as new. The dents had been smoothed out, the paint touched up, and the broken headlight replaced. If only family relationships could be fixed as easily as automobiles. My parents had followed through on their promise to cover all the costs related to the accident. My father had indeed taken out a home equity loan, and though part of me felt guilty about the financial strain this put on their retirement, another part felt it was a necessary consequence of their choices. Communication with my family remained minimal. My mother called every few days, her messages becoming less demanding and more respectful of my boundaries. My father sent occasional text messages, awkward but seemingly genuine in their concern for my well-being. Stephanie, however, had gone from angry accusations to complete silence. Through Robert, who surprisingly reached out to me directly, I learned more about what was happening with my sister. The divorce was proceeding, though not as contentiously as initially feared. "I wanted to thank you," Robert said during our unexpected coffee meeting. "Not for exposing the affair that was painful, but for forcing the truth into the open. Stephanie and I had been living a lie for years. I never meant to break up your marriage," I told him honestly. "You didn't. It was already broken. We were just pretending it wasn't." He sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "The funny thing is, now that everything's out in the open, We're actually communicating better than we have in years. We're going to try co-parenting as friends. How are Mason and Lily handling everything? Better than expected. Kids are resilient, and they still ask about their Aunt Jennifer. His words warmed something in me. Despite everything, I loved my niece and nephew and missed them terribly. I'd like to see them, if that's okay with you. Robert nodded. I'd like that. They need family who model honesty and self-respect. I think you can be a good influence. The irony wasn't lost on me that in the midst of family breakdown, I was being recognized as a positive force rather than the family disappointment. While my personal relationships were being recalibrated, my professional life flourished. I threw myself into my work, taking on several high-profile design projects that challenged and energized me. The freedom to focus on my career without the constant background noise of family drama proved remarkably productive. One Wednesday afternoon, as I was finalizing a logo design for a new client, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Stephanie standing there, looking more put together than during her last visit, but still subdued compared to her usual polished appearance. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual confidence. I hesitated but ultimately stepped aside. She entered, glancing around my apartment as if seeing it for the first time. "Your place is really nice," she said. "I never noticed before." "Thanks. What brings you here, Stephanie?" She sat down carefully on my couch. "I've been in therapy," she said, the words clearly difficult for her. "Part of my work is making amends to people I've hurt." I sat across from her, surprised but cautious. "Okay. I've been thinking a lot about us, about how Mom and Dad always favored me, and how I took advantage of that, about how I've treated you over the years." She took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, Jennifer. For the car, obviously, but for so much more than that. For dismissing your achievements, for making everything about me, for never being the sister you deserved." The apology was so unexpected that I didn't immediately know how to respond. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Is this just because your life fell apart?" She flinched but nodded slowly. "Partly yes. Losing everything makes you reevaluate, but also because for the first time I saw myself through your eyes and I didn't like what I saw. I never wanted your life to implode, Stephanie." "I know. That's what makes this worse. If our situations had been reversed, I can't say I would have shown the same restraint." She looked down at her hands. "Robert and I are working things out, not as a couple, but as co-parents. It's better than I expected." "I'm glad to hear that, for the kids' sake. I miss them." "They're with Robert most of the time now while I'm getting my life together." Her eyes filled with tears. "I always thought I was the lucky one in our family, the favorite. Now I realize you were stronger all along. You built your life on your own terms, without needing everyone's approval." Her words hit me like a revelation. She was right. Despite the pain of being the less favored child, I had developed independence and resilience that Stephanie never had to cultivate. "It's not a competition, Stephanie. We've both been shaped by our family dynamic, just in different ways. I'd like to try again," she said hesitantly. "As sisters. Real sisters who support each other, not whatever we've been doing all these years." I considered her words carefully. "I'd like that too, but it won't happen overnight. Trust takes time to rebuild." "I know. I'm willing to put in the work if you are." As she left, I felt a cautious hope that perhaps something new and healthier could emerge from the wreckage of our old relationship patterns. My extended family had also been transformed by the events. Relatives who had previously maintained polite distance now reached out regularly, sharing stories of their own experiences with family favoritism and betrayal. These connections felt authentic in a way my immediate family relationships often hadn't. Even my parents were slowly changing. 3 months after the confrontation, they suggested family therapy, something I never would have expected from them. Our first session was awkward and tense, with my mother crying through much of it and my father sitting stiffly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotional vulnerability. But by the third session, something shifted. My father, a man who had never acknowledged fault in his life, looked at me directly and said, "We failed you, Jennifer. We convinced ourselves we were being fair, but we weren't. I'm sorry. It wasn't everything, but it was a start." The car that had been at the center of this family earthquake was now simply a car again, a nice one, certainly, but no longer imbued with all the symbolic weight of my self-worth and independence. The real change had happened within me. I had finally stood up for myself, refused to accept less than I deserved, and in doing so, had altered the family dynamic that had defined much of my life. As fall turned to winter, I found myself actually looking forward to the holidays for the first time in years. Not because I expected perfection, but because I was approaching family gatherings as an equal participant, rather than an afterthought. Whatever happened, I would face it with the newfound confidence that came from knowing my own worth, a worth that no car, career success, or family approval could define. If my story resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama. Have you ever had to stand up to your family for your own self-respect? Share your experiences in the comments below. Thank you for joining me on this journey of self-discovery and setting boundaries. Remember, sometimes the most important family lesson is learning when to put yourself first. 6 months after the BMW incident that had catalyzed so much change, I stood in my parents' driveway, keys in hand, admiring my fully repaired car. The sleek black paint gleamed in the spring sunshine, all traces of the accident erased by skilled technicians. If only human relationships could be restored so completely, I thought, running my hand along the smooth hood. Still love that car, huh? I turned to see my father standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, a tentative smile on his face. "It's a good car," I replied, returning his smile. "But just a car." And that was perhaps the biggest change of all. The BMW that had once represented so much to me, my success, my independence, my need for my family's acknowledgement, was now simply a vehicle that got me from one place to another. My sense of self-worth no longer depended on external validation, whether from material possessions or family approval. The past 6 months had brought seismic shifts to every member of my family. Stephanie and Robert's divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, but contrary to everyone's expectations, it had evolved into an amicable co-parenting relationship. Stephanie had moved from their spacious suburban home into a modest 3-bedroom house closer to the city, where she hosted Mason and Lily every other week. The change in living situation had humbled her in ways nothing else could have. For the first time in her adult life, Stephanie was living within a budget, balancing work responsibilities with single parenthood, and facing the consequences of her choices without our parents swooping in to fix everything. "It's actually been good for me," she admitted during one of our newly established monthly sister lunches. "I never had to stand on my own 2 feet before. It's scary, but also empowering." "Welcome to how most adults live," I'd teased, but without the bitterness that would have colored such a comment in the past. Our relationship remained a work in progress. Decades of dysfunctional patterns couldn't be undone in a few months, but there was a new authenticity between us. We were learning to be sisters who supported, rather than competed with each other, who acknowledged both our differences and our common history. My parents had undergone their own transformation. The family therapy sessions, which had started awkwardly, had gradually opened channels of communication none of us knew how to access before. My father especially seemed changed by the experience. "I never realized how much we favored Stephanie," he said during one particularly emotional session. "We always told ourselves we were treating you both equally, just differently because you had different needs. But that wasn't true, was it?" "No," I'd answered simply. "It wasn't." My mother had struggled more with acknowledging the imbalance. "We just worried about Stephanie more," she'd insisted initially. "You were always so capable, Jennifer. You didn't seem to need us the way she did." "Everyone needs to be valued, Mom," I'd responded. "Even capable people." Gradually, she'd come to understand how their well-intentioned protectiveness towards Stephanie had morphed into favoritism that damaged both their daughters in different ways. My relationship with Mason and Lily had strengthened in unexpected ways. With Robert's blessing, I'd established a regular Aunt Jennifer Day twice a month, where I took them for activities their parents couldn't or wouldn't do. Art museums for Lily, who showed early signs of creative talent, and science centers for Mason, who was fascinated by robotics. "You're good with them," Robert observed after I returned the children from one such outing. "You treat them like people, not extensions of yourself or trophies to show off." "They are people," I'd replied, surprised by the observation. "Pretty awesome ones." My extended family connections had also flourished. Aunt Lisa and I now spoke weekly, and cousin Mark and his wife had become regular dinner companions. These relationships felt easy and supportive in ways my immediate family ties had never been, unburdened by the complicated history of favoritism and expectations. Professionally, my graphic design business was thriving. I'd hired an assistant to help with the increased workload and was considering expanding further. The confidence I'd gained from standing up for myself in my personal life had spilled over into my professional interactions, making me more assertive with clients and more willing to pursue high-profile projects. And then there was Brian, the architectural photographer I'd met while working on a brochure for a new downtown development. Our relationship was still new, just 3 months, but promising in ways my previous relationships hadn't been. He valued honesty and directness, traits I'd strengthened through my family ordeal, and he respected the boundaries I'd learned to establish. "I like that you know what you want and aren't afraid to say it," he'd told me on our 3rd date. "It's refreshing." Standing in my parents' driveway now, preparing for another family dinner, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for most of my adult life. Not because everything was perfect, it wasn't, but because I now approached family gatherings from a position of self-respect rather than desperate need for approval. "Coming inside?" my father asked, interrupting my thoughts. "In a minute," I replied, "just enjoying the spring air." He nodded and headed back toward the house, then paused. "I'm proud of you, Jennifer. I should have said it more often all these years. You've built a good life on your own terms. That takes courage." The words I'd longed to hear for decades landed differently now that I no longer needed them to feel complete. "Thanks, Dad. That means a lot." Inside, the family dinner was both familiar and transformed. My mother still fussed over the food, Stephanie still talked a bit too much about her children's accomplishments, and there were still moments of tension when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there was also a new awareness, a conscious effort to create space for everyone at the table. When my mother asked about my work, she actually listened to the answer. When Stephanie began to dominate the conversation, she caught herself and asked about my recent projects. When my father praised Mason's science fair victory, he made a point of also acknowledging my recent design award. Small changes, perhaps imperceptible to outsiders, but monumental in the context of our family history. After dinner, as we gathered in the living room for coffee, I found myself sitting next to Stephanie on the couch, our shoulders almost touching. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't installed that dash cam?" I asked quietly. She considered the question seriously. "I'd probably still be living a lie with Robert. Mom and Dad would still be enabling my worst behavior, and you'd still be accepting less than you deserve." She shook her head. "It's strange to be grateful for something that was so painful, but I am. That car accident might have been the best thing that happened to all of us." Looking around at my imperfect but evolving family, I had to agree. The BMW incident had been the catalyst for change that was long overdue. The repairs to my car had been expensive but straightforward. The repairs to our family relationships were more complex and ongoing, but infinitely more valuable. As I drove home that evening in my beautifully restored car, I reflected on how often in life the things we think we want approval, validation, being seen as right, are poor substitutes for what we truly need: respect, authenticity, and the courage to stand up for ourselves even when it's difficult. My car now represented not just material success, but a moral victory and newfound self-respect. Every time I got behind the wheel, I was reminded of the moment I decided I deserved better, and how that decision had changed everything. If you've ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Was it worth it? Did relationships heal or permanently change? Your experiences might help others facing similar situations. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more real-life family stories, and share with anyone who might need encouragement to value themselves. Thank you for listening to my journey from doormat to self-respect. Remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to set boundaries and hold people accountable for how they treat you.